So in this video, we are going to turn to the production side of things and focus on some key concepts and terms on the production side. So we talked a bit about cost before. And we're going to continue working with this example of the pizza restaurant. Okay? We have 2 ovens, and we can vary the number of workers. So bear in mind, short run, our variable input is number of workers. Okay? So first key concept we need to introduce here is that of the marginal product, in this case of labor or of workers. And why are we focusing on workers? Well, because in this case, right, our output only changes as we increase the number of workers because we have a fixed number, in this case 2, pizza ovens. So how do we define the marginal product of labor? Well, it's the change in output, change in quantity, divided by the change in the number of workers. So obviously if I've got 0 workers, I've got 0 pizzas. I add the first worker, I now go from 0 to 200 pizzas. So my marginal product of labor is 200 pizzas. I add the second worker, the marginal product for that second worker, well, my output goes from 2 to 450. It's a change of 250. When I add the third worker, number of pizzas increases by 100, then by 50, 25, and 15. Now, a couple things I want you to note here. When you look at this, what's happening is that the marginal product is at first increasing and then starts to diminish. Right? And you can relate that to that we had the concept of diminishing marginal utility when we talked about consumer theory. Well, again, we notice here that when we're looking at production in the short run, we expect that eventually the marginal product of our variable factor or factors, in this case, simple example, just one variable factor, that eventually that marginal product will start to diminish. So first thing we want to do is, so we'll show this graphically, but then we want to think about, well, why would that be the case? Okay? So first, we're going to draw 2 graphs here. So the first one is actually, we'll look at our total product, and we're going to plot this over number of workers. Okay? And so we go from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in this upper graph, we'll have total product. And then here, we're going to plot marginal product. And then eventually, also want to show average product as well. So first, let's plot our total product. Obviously, 0 workers, we had 0 pizzas. Okay. And then at first worker, our output goes up to 200 pizzas. Second worker gets us all the way up to 450. And the third one gets us to 550, 600, and then those increments are getting smaller and smaller. So if you look at our total product curve, it looks kind of something like this. Okay? So notice if you're looking at this, and I'm always reminding you guys, I'm not an artist, right? If you're looking at it, initially, when you're looking at that total product, it's rising very rapidly, and in fact, it increases, the increase is bigger when going from the first to the second worker, right? That marginal product is 250, than when you're going from the 0th to the first worker. So our total product curve, not only is it upward sloping, but that slope is increasing, but then eventually it starts to get flatter. So let's plot that out in terms of our marginal product. We'll have a different scale here on the y-axis. So the marginal product of that first worker is 200. For the second worker, that marginal product is all the way up here at 250. And then for the third worker, it plummets all the way down to 100. And we're going down to 50, 25, and 15. So our marginal product looks something like this, right? So what's going on here? So if you look at these 2 curves, you'll notice this relationship in the shape here. Marginal product hits its peak at 2 workers. and then it starts to decline. And you can see that related to the shape here of your total product curve, right? That when marginal product starts to decline, that's when the total product curve is getting flatter. On the other hand, if you look at right to the left of two workers here, as the marginal product of labor is rising from the first to second worker, over that number of workers, total product is actually getting steeper. Right? So that's how the two curves are related to each other, right? Total versus marginal. And again, why is that the case? It's because the marginal product is actually just the slope of the total product curve. Okay? And so that's why you notice this repetitive, right, this theme throughout the course, that if you have a curve like a total product, a total cost, a total utility, whatever it might be, that the marginal cost, the marginal product, the marginal utility is just the slope of that curve. Okay? Now, one other concept we need to introduce here is that of average product of labor. Right? And the average product of labor is just Q over L, right? Output per worker, okay? So while marginal product of labor is the change in output per additional worker, average product is just output divided by the number of workers. And so, again, we can't define average product for 0 workers. So what is the average product when we have 1 worker? Well, it's 200 divided by 1, or 200. For 2 workers, I can get 450 pizzas, so 450 over 2 is 225. Then with the 3 workers, I've got 550 divided by 3, which should be the approximately 167. Just kind of round it off there. And then with 4 workers, right, 600 pizzas, so per worker that's 150, right? And we can see how this is then just continues to decline from there. Now, what is that then looking like here? So, and as we keep going here, keep going down here, so you've got 130 on this guy right here, and then for the last one, that is 106 and some change. So again, just going to round those off. You guys don't need to look all the way at the decimal places. To get the general, you get the general idea here. If we start to plot this out, right, so in this green here, the average product, the first with 1 worker is 200, then that goes up to 225, which is about here, right? Now, what about for the third, when we have 3 workers, the average product is 167. Okay? So that would be somewhere right about here. 4 workers, right, we're at 150, and then we said, down at 130, and then approximately 106, and then some change there. Okay. So if we're looking at average product, we've got this kind of shape here. And so what's going on? You can compare, of course, the values in our 2 columns, because that's what we plotted in here, and then also compare what the 2 curves look like graphically. Well, look at it. Initially, well, they're equal, right? But then at the second worker, notice that the marginal product is greater than the average product. And so what do you see happening here? That's where you see average product is rising. But then when we add the third worker, at that point, the marginal product of the third worker is less than the average product. And that's when we start to see average product, right? The average product is declining, right? And we keep seeing this, right? So then for 4, 5, or 6 workers, marginal product is much lower than average product. Average product continues to decline. And this is not an economics thing. This is just the relationship between marginals and averages, right, is that when the marginal product is greater than the average product is rising. And when the marginal product is less than the average product is declining. Okay? You see the same relationship with marginal cost and average cost curves as well. If it helps, I always think it helps to think about, maybe like a sports analogies. Right? So right now we're in baseball playoffs and the basketball season's getting underway, so you can take your pick. But let's go ahead and stick with baseball. So let's say you have a hitter who's coming into a game and is averaging, has a batting average of 250 for the season. Right? So that's the average product in this case, right? And now in this particular game, the hitter ends up going 1 for 3, right? Or in other words, they're hitting 333. Well, what is that going to do to the season average? Well, if you go 1 for 3 in this game and your season average was 250, that's going to pull your season average up. On the other hand, if he ended up going 1 for 4 and hit 250, well, then he'd be batting exactly his season average, right? And so nothing, right? It wouldn't change the season average at all, because in this case, the marginal performance this last game is just equal to the season average performance. And lastly, what if he came in instead and went 0 for 4, right, and hit 0? Well, clearly in this case, that's well below the season average, so that would drop the season average, right? You think about any game as the marginal performance, right, the marginal product, you can see how that relates to the season-long or average product. Okay? And this is true for, again, holds true for marginal product and average product, also holds true for average cost and marginal cost as well. Any two times when you're talking about any concept and you're relating the marginal to the average, you see this general relationship. Now, the last thing we need to talk about for our chapter on production and costs is the relationship between the short run and the long run average cost curves. And we'll do that in the next video.